Hello, everyone. I hope that everyone's Tuesday is going well. Today, we're going to talk about audience analysis, different types of audience, and then briefly go over what I expect from the speech outlines. So, hopefully, by now, everyone has emailed me their informative speech topic, and then this week, we'll work on outlining the speeches, and then next week, I'll get a video of the speeches from you guys. So, all right, let's get into it. This video will accompany a PowerPoint that should be uploaded to Canvas. All right, so there are 5 different types of audiences: captive, committed, contrary, concerned, and casual. And they have some sort of overlaps, but differences in audience impact the different ways that speakers need to adapt and speakers need to relate to the audiences. So for the first one, we have a captive audience. So captive audience, I think the best example of this is a class, or if you are working a job and your job forces you to attend some sort of like mandatory employee speaking engagement, right? So it's basically a speech in which the audience is forced to be there for any sort of reason. So captive audience. So they are compelled to listen, and usually they are listening because people in some sort of position of power insist upon it. So if you're giving a speech and people are forced to listen to you, they haven't elected via their own choice to be there, some of the concerns that you may face is trying to keep the audience engaged, right? Because if they've elected to be there on their own volition, they have a natural inclination towards listening more. But if someone is forced to be there, they might not. So gaining and maintaining the interest of a captive audience is of primary importance. And this can be done by all sorts of different ways, and we'll get into that more. All right. So the second one is a committed audience. So contrary to a captive audience, a committed audience elects to be there by choice. An example of this would be if someone chooses to attend a political rally, or like a motivational speaker, or like a lecture in an auditorium via their own choice. They are a committed audience. They have chosen to be there. So some challenges that this can face if you're the speaker is that you have to adapt towards knowing that people already have a proclivity to be on your side. So maybe at the end of the speech, you want to do a stronger call to action because you know that people already are inclined to agree with you. So you can be like, these are the things we can do, or these are the steps we can take once we leave this room, right? Yeah. So committed audience faces different challenges than a captive audience. All right. Then the third one is a contrary audience. So this is one where there is a hostility between the speaker and the audience, or where the audience believes different things than the speaker believes. So it's very commonly adversarial. So the goal, if you're the speaker, is to diffuse the anger. So you have to figure out a way to convince the audience that you actually are on their side, that they shouldn't be angry with you, or that their values actually align with your values and the clash is unnecessary. You want to diffuse the audience anger. So an example of this, I think, would be, let's see, like a political press conference in which like a local politician has not repaired the potholes and the audience is there to like yell at them, right? Or maybe on like a smaller level, if like you're having like a big family gathering and your family is just like, we don't like that you're marrying this person, we're mad at you, and then you have to kind of be like, all right, need to diffuse this anger, get these people back on my side. Yeah. So a lot of times they can do what's called ambushing, looking for weaknesses in your arguments, intentionally trying to like pounce on mistakes, Sometimes people can engage in like bad faith readings of arguments, intentionally misunderstand what you're saying, and I think it's important to like remain calm and cool in the face of adversity, and just sort of diffuse the tension. Yeah. So far we've had captive, where people are forced to listen; committed, where you've elected to go see a presentation or speaker; and contrary, where the audience is against the speaker. Next, we have, similarly to committed, concerned audience. So basically, the thing that distinguishes this is that people have gone to the speech to gather information, they're eager listeners, they're trying to learn. Yeah. And in this, the speaker should present new ideas and information in an attention-getting fashion, in a way that's clear, in a way that is not overly technical or complicated. It's funny that in years past, when I've been like, what's an example of this? Students have commonly been like, imagine this hypothetical scenario in which there was a pandemic and some sort of expert had to give medical information to the public on what to do. And, obviously now that's come true. So my class predicted it. Yeah. So, yeah, I think the main sort of concern for a speaker that has a concerned audience is presenting the information in ways that the audience can digest, that's not overly like technical. Because if it's some sort of like medical or like sort of political policy information, it's going to be hard for the audience to 100% understand the sort of expertise behind it, and the speaker wants to be able to make it digestible, comprehensible, logical, clear for the audience. Yeah. And then the last is a casual audience. So this is basically like if there's a like man on the street yelling and you're like, what's going on here? And out of curiosity, you go over and start listening. If you are the speaker here, if you're like, I've decided that I'm going to make, in my day off, I'm just going to stand at Broadway Junction and continuously give a speech about animal rights, then you're like, your goal as the speaker is to try and maintain people's interest. It's to pique their curiosity and get them to connect instantly and decide to stay and listen, right? So this one is difficult, obviously, because if people are, they got somewhere to be, they're not going to stop and listen for very long. But if you're giving like a very interesting speech or very interesting points, they might stick around. Yeah, or if you're doing some sort of banter with the audience, people like to stay for that. Yeah, so that's a casual audience. So obviously, the problem with this one, if you're the speaker, is that people can leave at any second, and you need to keep them there, create that interest and that attention. All right. Next, we're going to talk about attitudes, beliefs, and values. All right. So, an attitude is basically someone's learned predisposition towards an object or thing, right? So, it's basically like, do they associate something with positive or negative reactions, right? So, maybe it's like if there's like a place you remember positively from your childhood, like a certain beach or, like vacation spot, or just like even like a restaurant or something. It's like when you think of that or you walk by it or you hear about it, you feel sort of nostalgic and good, right? You have a learned predisposition through experience to a positive association with that thing, right? The next is belief. So this is basically what a person thinks is true or probable. So it's like if you're like, oh, I believe that the subway is efficient. That's something that you believe that may or may not be true. And then the last one is value. So these are sort of building in seriousness. So if you have attitude is the lowest, like that's just your sort of instant reaction. And then belief is sort of like a deeper conviction. Then the deepest one is value, which is like a deeply held moral or ethical belief. A generally shared view of what is deemed good, right, or worthwhile thinking and behavior. And attitudes, beliefs, and values are super, super important to consider when you're giving a speech and when you're thinking about audiences, because if you're trying to persuade someone, or if you're trying to present someone with information that is contrary to the values that that group of people holds, they're not going to be receptive to that information. They're going to be hostile to it, or they're going to be a contrary audience, right? Like if you walk into a group of, like if you walk into like a church and you're just like, yeah, I think that this God concept is silly, that like no one will take you seriously because it's contrary to the values that that group of people holds, right? So when you're giving a speech, and why we're talking about this right now before the informative speech, is because you always want to think about the audience when you're giving a speech, because adapting the speech information to the audience is one of the most important things you can do to make the speech effective and to make the audience either persuaded or convinced or just receptive to the information that you're presenting. You want to convince the audience that your values are their values, or that their beliefs are your beliefs. You're one of them, right? All right, so that's attitudes, beliefs, and values. Next, I want to talk really quickly about like the concept of demographics. Demos meaning village in ancient Greek, right? So it's sort of like and graphics. What is graphics? I think graphics means like pictures. Let's see. Graphics meaning in Greek. Visual, yeah, drawn. So if you think of the word demographics as like the drawing of the village, like the composition of the village, what does the population look like? So it's characteristics of an audience, demographics. So age, race, gender, culture, class, group affiliations, religious background, stuff like that. And this is super key, similarly for what we were talking about with attitudes, beliefs, and values, because you want to be able to know your audience, to know what sort of experiences they've had, what things they're going to find relevant, what stuff they're going to gel with, and what stuff they're going to reject outright. So, for example, if you're giving a speech to a group of 15-year-olds and you're like, all right, this is my super in-depth speech on the inner workings of Social Security, they're not going to be interested, most likely. Someone might, but most likely as a whole, because Social Security is something that applies to the elderly, retired people. So you want to know the audience, you want to know the demographics, and the background of the people you're speaking to. All right. So similarly to analyzing audiences is establishing identification with the audience. So identification is the affiliation and the connection between the speaker and the audience. You want to be able to show genuine empathy and concern for the problems and like experiences of the audience. You want to promote some sort of cohesion. You want the audience to know that you're one of them, right? Because like if you go to give a speech somewhere, people's first reaction is, who is this person? Why should I listen to them? Why do they know what they're talking about? And if you can build that, what Aristotle called ethos, right? Credibility. If you can build that credibility, it is rhetorically powerful in creating a good speech. So identification is really key to this. So if you can go to a group of high schoolers and try and convince them to, join the cross country team, you can be like, well, I ran cross country and it was really key in my life for these reasons: teaching hard work, exercise, meeting people, like building a competitive environment, yada, 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 whatever the reasons are. But you being like, oh, that's something I did, I'm an expert on it, I understand it, makes the information you're presenting more palpable, more convincing to the audience. You've established an identification with them. You're like, I went through the things you went through, and this is how I experienced it. All right, really quick, I want to talk about style. So you always want to know the audience, know the setting. So you want to know to what degree Should you be formal or casual, both in word choice and also in dress? Should you use certain slang, or should you use certain like insider terms to show the audience that you're like, oh, this person gets it. They know the vocabulary of what we're talking about. There's a stylistic similarity, right? That sort of thing is important. Yeah, you want to build your credibility. So credibility comes in kind of three ways. Um, Basically, it's like how believable you are as a communicator, right? But that connects with how competent you are. Does the audience perceive the speaker's knowledge and experience as legitimate? And then lastly, how trustworthy the speaker is. Sometimes people just come across as not believable, not trustworthy, and that can almost be instinctual. Like sometimes I feel like you'll be having a conversation with business people, and you get that feeling where you know that someone is not being 100% truthful. So you want to build credibility, show that you're competent, and establish some sort of trustworthiness with the audience. All right. You also want to be dynamic. And this goes along with what we were talking about before, just about like with the kind of split between content and form, right? So like the content of the speech needs to be of high quality, but also the style that it's presented in needs to be of high quality for the speech to be good. So I think of dynamism as like how much energy you have. You want to be enthusiastic and forceful, but you also don't want to be over the top. You want to be able to read the room. So as we talked about before, if you're talking about a sad topic, don't be overly enthusiastic, and vice versa. Yeah. Lastly, you want to be able to be adaptable. So you need to be paying attention to signals sent by the audience, and you need to be able to see when listeners are losing interest, and sort of capture them into the fold through maybe more enthusiasm or animation, or maybe through like a quick sort of didactic story that can recapture their attention and get people paying attention again. Yeah. All right. So I think that should be good on audience. Real quick on outlines. So the best way to think of an outline is think of it like a speech is basically the same as writing a paper. And as you know, the most important thing about writing a paper is you want to have a strong thesis statement. Your thesis in a paper is the argument of the paper. But in a speech, I like to call this a purpose statement. So, what is the point of giving this speech? Why should you bother giving it, and why should anyone bother listening to it? So, if you can think in a one sentence way, what is the point of this? What is the like boiled down essence of the thing I am trying to communicate to the audience? Write that out, right? Just start with that. And then from there on down, uh, think about ways that that purpose statement unfolds in order that the audience can understand what you're saying. So it can either go chronologically, right? If you're giving a speech that's like the history of blank, you might need to say this. You might need to do it in chronological order, so like time. So in 1950 this happened, then 1970 this happened, 1980 this happened, and on through. You can do it thematically. So there are like you can be like some people like this, other people dislike this, some people are in the middle about it, and yeah, similarly to that, you can do it ideologically, right? So you can say the morality of this is, and there's different movements, and here's different stakeholders of things that people believe, and sort of list it out. But it's always key in an outline to get back to that purpose statement to say, like, does the point I'm making here contribute to advancing the purpose of the speech? Or is it just like wasted information? Right? They say that that's how screenwriters in movies think about things. They're like, what is the point of like there should be a purpose or point to every single piece of dialogue or everything that happens in a movie, even if it's just character building. But it should be purposeful. It shouldn't just be like wasted. And I think about that like the speech, because you don't have infinite time. So you want to make sure that everything you say builds on the last point and also advances the purpose of the speech. So I want you guys to have 4 sources at the end of your outline in a works cited bibliography kind of thing. I don't care the style of citation, but I want to know where you got the information from. Just basic research, 4 sources, easy. Doesn't need to be like JSTOR, fancy stuff. It can just be any sort of basically reputable source. Yeah, that should be good. All right, guys, so that was audience and outlines. If anyone has any questions, send me an email. Outlines due Friday. Have a good week.